Well, no more questions. Without any further ado, I'll move us to our last speaker, Simba. Whenever you're ready, make a start.
Hello everyone. Thank you all for attending our debate tonight on whether or not it is a good thing for the world to becoming ever more connected thanks to the internet. I will be arguing against the motion, namely that this ever-increasing connectivity is a bad thing. No one could deny that connectivity is a good thing. Through a well-connected society, we are able to make education of the highest quality accessible to more people than ever. We can link those who need help to those who can provide it. We can socialize and make friendships with those from other cultures in order to enrich our lives. The common theme of these positive aspects of connectivity is diversity. Fundamentally, to improve and learn as individuals, we need to spend time with those who have different skills, knowledge, and ideas to expand our own horizons. As a professor working in the sciences, some of my most immersive and engaging conversations are had with those working in the arts and literature faculties. However, fundamentally, through evolution, humans and indeed almost all other species have become averse to confrontation. The reasons why are fairly obvious. If you have a conflict in the wild, this could lead to you being killed or harmed to the point where you are not able to get enough food to survive. So naturally, over millions of years, genetics have favored those who choose to shy away from full-blown conflict. However, overconnectivity, due mostly to the way the internet is progressing, is very dangerous. Because this innate aversion to conflict is present in almost all modern-day humans, it was previously the case that, as an individual in your town or city, you could and would interact with others locally to find a diverse and varied range of views, from which you could learn and refine your own understanding as an individual. Your views from these people would naturally differ, but this sort of safe, low-level conflict is healthy. However, many find it uncomfortable due to the evolutionary reasons previously mentioned. As a result of this, many people simply turn to the internet and find a plethora of people supporting their viewpoint, often in its entirety with ease. Where previously, by means of local interaction and sharing of knowledge and viewpoints, we may have been able to learn more from those around us locally in terms of their ideals and politics, we are now all too often consumed by those pushing the same message we already believe via the internet. Twitter is an excellent example of such an echo chamber. It is, as an individual, far more comforting to surround ourselves with individuals and groups who share our viewpoints, because the risk of conflict with said groups is much smaller than it would be with other groups with whom we do not share so many common ideals. To some degree, this is healthy. Everyone needs a tribe to which they can feel affiliation and belonging in order to function ordinately as a social mammal. No one would question the value of the furry fandom, or indeed Furry Valley, in order of what it provides to each of us as a warm, safe, and happy place to belong, where we do not experience threat, do not have to fear conflict, and do not have battles with one another. Perhaps the most important thing to be ever conscious of is why we, as individuals, have chosen to band with a particular group. For example, politically left-leaning individuals tend to place a focus on social equality and equal rights for everyone. It makes good sense for those who wish to strive to achieve these goals to band together with others who also wish to do so, in order to create success for themselves more easily. The dangers, and they are absolutely not to be understated, occur when we lose sight of why we banded together with these other individuals and groups. An excellent example is the recent debacle on Twitter, where a number of disturbed yet well-connected individuals lied and attempted to slander Furry Valley and some of our members as anti-LGBT, anti-black, and so forth. The majority of the people liking and retweeting these scourges were people who have no experience with us and would absolutely disagree with what was being said by these people if they did have experience with us. Unfortunately, however, they had lost sight of why they were following the well-connected individuals and simply became parrots for their every message. This is the real danger of overconnectivity. By isolating ourselves with people who only feel the same way we do, we close our eyes We no longer function as individuals and instead form part of what can be a torturous collective. We don't learn from those who can teach us. We close our ears. 2019 is the 80th anniversary of the start of World War II, the greatest and most harrowing example of how a collective and unmoderated mindset, given no thought at an individual level, can cause destruction beyond belief. We must never let this happen again. Think for yourself. Don't be a sheep. Again, I am arguing against tonight's motion, but I want everyone to consider the arguments of all our speakers carefully and choose whether or not you believe the ever-increasing connectivity of society to be a good or a bad thing. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Simba? We have one. Amriel.
So you mentioned the danger of essentially hive minds and people thoughtlessly banding together. Would you not say that is less a failing of increased connectivity and more a failing of the individuals not seeking out alternative viewpoints and not putting in the effort to make sure the information they have at their disposal is correct?
What you say is true, but people will naturally go down the path of least resistance. And if we continue to make things more and more connected, people will find it more and more easy to find themselves surrounded by people who believe exactly what they already believe, which is why we see the left becoming more extreme, we see the right becoming more extreme, and the center is gouged out. So yes, I absolutely it's the responsibility of the person, but we're not making it easy for the person by becoming too connected.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ceylon.
Do you think that anonymous collective mindset versus non-anonymous collective mindset, do you think one is better than the other?
I think the anonymous one is more dangerous. The reason being, people demonstrably, whether they're part of a hive mind or not, will say things to you online that they would not dare to say to you in real life, to say to a person. I think it's partially that it's anonymous, but also that it's dehumanizing. You almost feel like I'm just talking to a screen. You forget that it's a real person. So I think the anonymity, but also the dehumanizing aspects of the online connectivity and what that turns a hive mind into makes it more dangerous than the non-anonymous version.
Thank
you.
Victor, I don't really see how that's a question. I'll ask it and see what you can bring up.
Okay.
Could one slipping point that drives a person to forget why they banded to a group stem from fear of rejection? Because World War II was started by fear and it proved to create a horrible thing, like you said, but the majority of the people that actually did the horrors were convinced to be afraid of a certain.
No, I think the majority of the people who did the horrors of World War II were normal people like you and I, and they simply stopped thinking for themselves. I don't think it's that they thought, oh no, I'm afraid. Of course, that's some of it. But yeah, it's simply believing what you're told, not keeping your mind active. That's why it's that, yeah, I feel that's why those people did those things.
So
not simply.
I have a question on this point.
Okay.
Doesn't the rise of collectivist ideologies at the beginning of the 20th century and their ascendancy in the 30s and 40s prove in fact that it's not really the internet that drives people banding together in quite tribal instincts? It's other things. It's economic instability, and it's usually to do with, and in that case, it was to do with the rise of print and mass media, and also to do with the kind of the new force of nationalism. So these are trends which are massively unrelated to the internet, and yet that was when collectivist ideologies, where people didn't think for themselves, were at their strongest. unlike today. How does that go with your argument?
I don't think necessarily that what we see today is any less strong. It hasn't expressed itself, thank God, in the same ways, but I don't feel it's any less strong. I think that what we saw back in the 30s and 40s was, as you say, triggered by mass media, but it's triggered by only having one opinion. It's triggered by lack of dialogue, lack of discussion, lack of diversity of opinion. So the internet is making that easier. There are more places now where you can go and surround yourself by people who will only say what you say and they'll only feel what you feel. So it's not the case that we require the internet for this to be a problem, but it sure as hell makes it easier. And I think it's far more widespread in the next sort of 10 years. It's going to be, it's already a big deal, but in the next 10 years, it's going to be terrible, I reckon.
Okay, we've got a lot more questions, so I'm going to make this the last call. When Pastor Box is done asking his question, I will close the questions for Simba.
Okay, so would you actually not agree that the world was actually a much more dangerous place before the advent of the internet, due to such things as like little communities of people who would end up banding together and doing horrible things, such as, say, the witch trials, as an example. With the advent of the internet, it's of my opinion that the world's actually gotten much less violent, despite the increase in the hive mind mindset. Would you not agree?
No, I wouldn't agree. In the time before the internet, I would have an option to, in terms of a collective mindset, getting to know the people in my town or my city or adjacent towns and cities in order to form my view of the world. Now that I'm on the internet, if I have views that are extremist in one way or another, I can very easily find people who share those same views, and therefore my views become accentuated and become more and more extreme. Whereas previously in my town and city, I may have struggled to find people who had views that far out, and hence I would have become more moderate. So I think it's actually the opposite, though we can find examples, as we had in the Second World War and the Salem witch trials, where if one set of people all believe one thing, that's dangerous. But I think it's much easier now, similar to how what Packet was asking about. I think it's much, much easier and much more widespread.
All right, Crimson.
Hello. I was just wondering, back to your point of how the internet can be used to spread very dangerous ideas and people finding like-minded people for their extremist views. I fully agree that that is a definite downside to the connectivity of the internet. We've seen it already have very bad effects. However, it can also have the reverse effect. It can have, and what I mean by that is that through the connectivity of the internet, I feel the spread of information so that people do not have, collect my words, so that people could educate themselves on a matter more thoroughly through different viewpoints. Without the internet, if it is solely through face-to-face conversations, which it was before the internet came into being, it's much easier for the spreading of false information. It's much easier for people through the practice of indoctrination, an example of which would be the current cults and religions that still practice this, where they try to cut off communication with the outside world and only have their members listen to them through their word of mouth alone. And in those communities, they believe it. That is their source of information, is through talking with the individuals that they live around. And some of these individuals, when they leave those communities and interact with the world and they get connected to the internet, connected to other people of different viewpoints, there have been many of them who decide not to go back, as the flood of new information and seeing other people from across the world and how they operate, and through comparison, see that the life that they lived was detrimental. And in that way, the connectivity and the swarm of information has been a benefit.
Okay.
Yep.
So there were a couple of distinct points there. So first, let me address your point about education. I mentioned in my speech that through a well-connected society, we were able to make education of the highest quality accessible to more people than ever, and that's certainly a good thing. But you went on to that to mention that people would be able to, through that accessibility, find different points of view and explore them. But as I mentioned previously, people will generally follow the path of least resistance. People are very conflict averse, and so people will naturally choose to go down the path which offers them the least resistance. They'll choose to band with the people who don't have a different opinion for themselves, just because it feels uncomfortable to have a conflict with someone. Your second point was about the prevalence of a closed society and being indoctrinated by a religion face to face. I would say that's no different from the fake news that we have on the internet. If people choose to be taken in by conspiracy theorists and people propagating this sort of nonsense, then they will be taken in by it. There can be information available outside, but that's not really a factor of the internet or not, because I think this kind of indoctrination exists both on the internet and in real life, as you pointed out.
Thank you very much. Right. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to move us on because we are coming up to the hour. So, I suppose that's the end of questions then. I'm putting up the final vote now, the big final vote. And as we do that, we'll do some announcements. So, there you go, everyone. Just get voting on that. Let's see if anyone's changed their mind. No more abstentions. Abstentions get named and shamed at this point. So first thing first, thank you everyone for coming. It means a lot to us. Don't forget, same time, same place, next week. Is having multiple partners immoral? That will be the debate. If you're interested on that topic, again, PM me and we'll try and fill you in as a speaker. So that, yeah. Same time, same place next week. I'll see you all there. Beyond that, after that week, we'll be repolling. If you have any great ideas for motions, send them to me in PM, and they will find their way to the poll. And who knows, we might just be debating the topic of your choice. I think that's about it. Does anyone have any other events to announce?
Yeah. So I'd like to go and mention, if you'd like to be a guest on one of our podcasts, please check the debate active chat now. React with a 1 if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast for fursuits and fursuiting. That's 8 p.m. Eastern this coming Monday. And react with a 2 if you would like to be a guest on our podcast for furry conventions. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday, the 11th of February.